organisations doing everything from initial consultation and design through custom development of themes and plugins and support and everything end to end. Then about a year ago, I joined Automatic. I work with them as a happiness engineer on the WordPress.com sites. So I work with users of those sites, helping them to get their site up and running, troubleshooting problems for them, all sorts of different bits and pieces. It ranges from really, really kind of low-level sales stuff through to quite technical domain management stuff and really kind of debugging of plugin errors and that kind of thing. So you could say I've spent a bit of time fixing sites for people. So that's the basic gist of it. It's really quite wide-ranging. I can have a day where everything is quite simple, and then I'll have days where I'm racking my brain and asking for help because things aren't talking correctly. Yesterday I had someone who was trying to integrate Stripe payments with their site, which should just work, and it does just work for like 99.9% of people, but for this one case, it didn't work, and I was the lucky person who got to try and figure that out. The answer is we're still figuring it out. But yeah, basically I get to troubleshoot what goes wrong with people's sites. They come to me either over email or in chat, and the first thing I have to do is figure out what the problem is. You don't all have access to happiness engineers to do that for you, but I'm hoping that I can teach you all a few tips to kind of do that troubleshooting stage of things. It's not going to tell you what the fix is necessarily, but it's going to narrow down what the problem is, which will help inform you of what you need to do as a next step. The first thing, something's gone wrong. First thing you want to do is back up your site. Now, I'm hoping that most of you are doing this already. Ideally, you've already got a backup that's being taken regularly, so when something's gone wrong, you've got a fallback you can go back to. Even if you haven't, it's time to do one right now. When you're troubleshooting, you might be turning some things on and off, you might be changing some settings. It's always good to have a snapshot of this point in time that you can go back to, just in case you make things worse. I recommend using Updraft Plus. It's a free plugin. It's really great. It can do backups on demand. You can also schedule them, I think, as well. But in this instance, something goes wrong. If you can get access to your WP admin to actually do it, then take a backup straight away. And then the next trick is to figure out what the problem is. Now, you've probably been you've added a plugin, you've changed a setting, you've tried to publish something, and something's gone wrong. That's all a little bit vague. I've learned that when someone comes into chat or to email with me and says, my site's not working, it can mean everything to some kind of fatal PHP error that has taken down the whole site and they can't access it all, through to someone who's got a spelling mistake on their homepage and they're freaking out because there's an extra A in the word. So when I get those kinds of chats, there's a few questions that I roll through to try and narrow into what the heart of the actual problem is in order to start figuring out what's causing it. So the first one I ask what page they're on. I ask, essentially, where were you when the problem happened? Were you in WP admin? Were you in a setting for a plugin? Were you editing a page or a post? Or were you on the front end of the site viewing it? Where were you when it happened? What were you trying to do? What was the action that you took when the problem happened? So we're narrowing down when things happen. So if it happened when you loaded the site, great, we know that's happening probably for everyone. But if it happened when you took an action, like changed a setting or published a post, it narrows it down a little bit further. Next, I ask, what did they think would happen? If you took an action, what was your expectation? That the post would save, that the setting would save, that something would look different on the front end and it doesn't. Which is the next thing. What actually happened? You were here, you did something, you expected this to happen, but what was the actual result? So as we drill in with these kinds of questions, you start to actually really clearly define what the problem is. For me, when I'm doing it for someone else, it's super helpful for me to have that defined. But for you, it just helps to actually think about what the problem really is, and it's the first step of kind of digging into it. It also means that if you need to report the problem to IT support, to a plugin developer, to your custom developer or something like that, you can actually give them a detailed description, which for them will be hugely helpful, trust me. They love it. The more information you give them, the better. So if you've gone through this kind of process, you're able to give them clear information to get going. So I've found that once I've done that kind of process, There are a few, not standard, but there's a pathway of different types of problems that people run into with their sites. I've found that often you can diagnose the type of problem it is by how close they get to viewing the site. I'll show you that in a second. So the first point you reach where there's a problem is to do with domains. Domains and DNS problems are often when you'll see error messages like these ones, where the site can't be reached. It's just not there at all. This is in Chrome. It'll often show you DNS probe finished NX domain. That's a really specific error code that Chrome has. But it's basically saying it can't find the domain you're looking for. Oftentimes the first thing to check is that you haven't typed the domain in correctly, because that's what will happen if you type in a domain that just doesn't exist. But it can also mean that if you're sure that's your domain, maybe it's expired and you needed to renew it, or maybe there's an error in the configurations and settings somehow. So the next thing you want to do is to see if you can check your domain and DNS settings. Now, to do this, eventually to make any changes to these, you would need to log into where you registered the domain. Whoever it was, maybe that might be the same place as where your site is hosted, but it could be somewhere different if you've, say, registered a domain with Crazy Domains, but your hosting is with Venture IP or something like that. They might be different places. But as a first step, it's actually possible to check the settings for your domain without logging in anywhere. It gives you a little bit of an idea. This website here, whatsmydns.net, I use this website probably 10 or 15 times a day. It's absolutely fantastic. It's kind of scary looking, but once you know what you're looking at, it's really, really helpful. What you do is you go to this site and you put in your domain into the search field, and you'll see there's a drop down there which is for the type of domain setting or domain record that it's referring to, but it will show you what the settings are for your domain all around the world. Now, this is my blog, and shortly before I took this screenshot, I actually made a change to my domain settings to break it a bit, and then changed it back. So what you're seeing here is that this is for the name servers. So this is, a name server will point you, all the traffic for the domain should go to this place. Basically, that's a really, really broad definition, but that's the basic idea. So what I want, because my site is hosted on WordPress.com, I want those ns1.wordpress.com name servers to be coming up all around the world for anyone to be able to view my site. You can see in Paris, Canada, in Seattle, that's not happening. It's got some broken setting or it's not coming up at all. Now, what the likelihood is there is that anyone who tried to view my blog from those locations would be getting an error saying it didn't exist, or some weird oddity around it like that. In this instance, I know that I made the change recently, and changes like that can take kind of 12 to 24 hours to really update all around the world. So I know I've just got to wait. But that's one of the kind of things you might see. Another is this is a similar problem. This is again my blog. The A records are pointing you to a specific server. So rather than just saying your site's on WordPress.com, which is what the name server does, this is saying your site's on this specific server at this IP address. And similarly, you can see this was about 5 minutes later. It's updated in more places, but still in Seattle and then down in India as well. They would be having trouble loading my site because the settings for the domain are not quite right. So that's your first port of call, is to do something like that. Sorry, I'm just going to turn this PowerPoint on so the slides don't die. So we figured out that there might be some kind of problem there, but how do you actually fix it? Yeah, so first thing to check is log into your domain registrar and just check that your domain is actually still active. You get sent reminders if it doesn't renew automatically, but oftentimes if it's a domain you bought a while ago, those reminders are sent to some Hotmail address you don't always check, or perhaps it's related to something you did previously and it's not an email address you check regularly. You can also have a look at the settings in there to see, just check that the name servers are pointing to your hosting. So where your website is hosted will be able to tell you the name servers that you need to use. You want to make sure that those match up. We see that when someone's been hosting a site somewhere else and they bring the domain to us and go, great, my domain's on WordPress.com, but it's still pointing over there. It's not pointing to us, it's pointing over there somewhere. And they wonder why their site isn't working. So that's the kind of thing we do there. All right. So say your site has now loaded. It's at least gotten to the domain seems to be working. The next thing that will pop up is some kind of 500 server error, PHP errors, when you see the white screen of death, which doesn't happen that often anymore. All these kinds of things are to do with the PHP on the server processing something incorrectly and not working. So you'll all, I'm sure, have seen this kind of error at some point when doing things. It's super vague and generic and tells you absolutely nothing except something didn't work. Or even better, you'll be in WP admin and it will just only load half of the content. It looks like it's kind of working, but it's not working as you expect. And depending on how things work with your hosting, or if you're doing things locally on your own computer, you might also see errors like this, where you actually get a little bit of information, but again, it's kind of gibberish. These are all essentially problems with PHP, which is, it runs on the server and it's what WordPress essentially sits on top of. It's something in the way that your site is being processed on the server before it gets displayed that is breaking. Now, in order to fix a lot of PHP problems, it can be helpful to have FTP access. Most of your hosts will allow that for you. What it means is that you see, rather than seeing the prettiness of your website, you see the file structure. So you'll see all of the files that make up your website, including the theme files and the plugin files. You might occasionally need that in order to remove plugins that are broken. You can change plugins and themes code directly on the server like that, but don't do it. It's one of those things. So since WordPress 5.2, so earlier this year, they introduced a new recovery mode, which is actually really, really brilliant. It's the reason that it will be very rare for you to ever see the white screen where just nothing loads. Very often you won't even see those 500 errors, the generic error that I showed up first. What happens when your site goes in, has recovery mode, if someone tries to load the site and there is a plugin or a theme or some kind of issue that makes the site not work, they'll at least see a neat but boring page that tells them something's wrong. If you're the site owner, you get a login link, which logs you into recovery mode, and it also sends an email to whoever the site administrator is. So in your settings general, there's a site admin email. Whatever is set in that will get notifications when something has broken, and actually gives you a little bit of detail as to what plugin it might have been that caused the problem so that you can deactivate it. Now, if you click the login to admin backend to fix this link, you'll be able to log in like normal, which is good, because otherwise you might not be able to when things are broken. And what it does is it loads you in this recovery mode, where it automatically disables the plugin that was causing the problem. So you at least can get into your site still and make changes to either troubleshoot or try and fix what the problem is. So this is really, really handy. It's a good reason to check what your admin email is in WordPress. Good news is, as soon as you update to 5.3, which came out this week, you'll get a prompt to check your admin email. They've started making that more important because it's getting notifications. Okay, so you've established there's some kind of PHP problem. That's still a little bit scary. How do we find what it is, and how do we fix it? So we need to find what the actual error is. To kind of, again, we're drilling down to get into more detail of what the problem is. One place you can find that is in your error log. Again, if you've got FTP access, a lot of the times there'll be a file on your server called error.log. If you open it up, it'll look something like this. Super helpful. You may also be able to find it if you've got cPanels. Sometimes they reveal the error logs, or your host otherwise. I know WP Engine will let you view error logs through their admin area. You can usually get access to the PHP errors, but it's still a little bit confusing. We'll get to that in a second. One thing you can do if you have FTP access is you can turn debugging on in your browser. So if you go to your FTP access and you edit the WP config file, you're able to add a couple of lines here which will start to show the error messages actually in the browser when you load the page. If you search for WordPress debugging, you'll find like 100 gazillion posts that people have written about how to turn it on. It's super easy. You just probably only want to do it for sites that are super low traffic or hobby sites. You wouldn't put it on a production site that's getting lots and lots of traffic because everyone's going to see all your errors. So what you would get is you get this situation where it loads some of the page, and then when the error has occurred, it actually gives us the information of what's happened. Again, kind of gibberish unless you work on understanding what's going on. So here is an example of one of those errors. This is an actual error in a site of mine. And again, when you look at that, on the whole, it's really easy for your eyes to just kind of glaze over and not be sure how to attack it. The good news is there's a few important parts we can pull out. First thing is we can see that it's a fatal error. What that means is a fatal error is something that just stops everything straight away. PHP is working trying to build the site. If it hits a fatal error, it will just stop. That's why you might see no content. It's why you might see part of the content and then it stops altogether because it's hit an error and it just gives up. It is possible to also get warnings, which are warning you that something's not right, but it keeps processing things. When it's a fatal error, it just stops everything altogether. Next, it tells us what the error is. It says there's a call to an undefined function, comments templated. Now, there's a little bit of a clue there as to what the problem might be. But essentially, when it's saying there's a call to an undefined function, it means it's looking for a function of code, something there has said, hey, do this thing. And when it's gone to find that thing to do, it's looked everywhere, behind the couch, under the cushions, everywhere. It can't find that bit of code to actually do. And then we also have these bits. The top one is saying, this is where it's said to try and do this function. So this is on our server in app public WP content themes 2019 single.php is where it's tried to use this comments template function. So that has helped us narrow down the kind of problem it is, and it's actually even narrowed down to the particular file where the problem is occurring. And we can look there and we can go, okay, it's in the 2019 theme, and it's the single page template. So anytime, well, single post template rather. So anytime someone is viewing a post on my site, this error is probably occurring because it's in that particular template file. So again, we've narrowed it down from it's a PHP error, oh, it's trying to call a function, it's trying to do something that doesn't exist, and it's happening in that particular file. At that point, it helps to know kind of what some of the common PHP errors you might find are. Let's be honest, when you see this error, the first thing you can do is go copy fatal error, uncaught error, call to undefined function, and paste it into Google, and you'll find out what it means. But if you want to know in advance, there's a few common ones. So call to undefined function is that one that I was talking about, where part of the PHP code is saying, do this thing, which is defined somewhere, and it's looked for that definition and it can't find it. In this instance, it's because there's a spelling mistake. If you have a look at the comments template, it's a fairly clear spelling mistake. The comments template function is actually a core WordPress function that does exist all the time unless you've inserted a typo in there on purpose. So that's a clue as to what's going on, and you can see what's starting to happen. So call to undefined function. Parse error, syntax error, unexpected, curly bracket, unexpected anything really. You can have all sorts of things in there. This is what happens when there's a problem with the coding of a theme or a plugin. Someone's got some text in there that's not meant to be there. Well, it's unexpected. And so PHP doesn't know what to do with it, so it just takes its bat and ball and goes home. Fatal error, allowed memory size of that many bytes has been exhausted. Who's seen this one before anywhere? A few of you. This is the one that happens when the PHP is working really hard at doing something, and it's working really hard and really hard and really hard, and then it just gives up because it's all too hard. Essentially, your server has a set amount of memory that is dedicated to doing this processing, and if it runs out, it just can't keep going. This is something you'll often see when you activate a new plugin or activate a new theme, or sometimes when you're publishing a post, when you have a lot of plugins activated, it can happen. It often comes down to, it can be to do with your server not having enough memory, and you can talk to your host about having that allowance bumped up. More often than not, it's to do with inefficiently or poorly coded plugins that are doing things in a bad way. There's an efficient way to do it, they're doing it inefficiently, and so it just can't cope. Fatal error, cannot redeclare function. This is the opposite of the undeclared function problem. This is what happens when the function exists, so that our comments template function exists, and then someone else had said, hey, I've got a function over here called comment templates. And the problem is that it's got two of them and it doesn't know which one to resolve to, so it decides to use neither. This can often happen, again, if a plugin is using kind of generic names for things, it can conflict with another one. It's when you see plugin conflicts and theme conflicts, you'll activate something and it conflicts with something that's already active. And again, in that kind of instance, it will tell you where the conflict is. It will tell you both of them usually. It'll tell you the file that it was first declared in and the file that was trying to declare it again, which means you can have a look at those two plugins or the theme in the plugin and decide which one you actually want to use, because you're not going to be able to use both of them. Warning, cannot modify header information, headers already sent. This is usually to do with, again, it's poorly coded themes or plugins. It's usually to do with some extra white space in files. So if someone's got like literally just a space bar in their file in the wrong place, it can make everything fall apart. But these are, you'd be able to research these a little bit more further if you ran into the problem. And again, being able to say to a developer or a contractor or whoever you're working with, this is what I was doing and this is the error I got, that gets them 90% of the way there towards figuring out how to fix it, because they don't have to do that digging themselves. So figured out the PHP problem, what do? Switch the theme. If the theme has a problem, the first thing you can do is switch to 2019 or 2020. The site's not going to look how you want, but at least it will work. And then you can work back from there. Similarly, you can deactivate the problem plugin. I know we don't like to deactivate plugins because they do stuff we like, but if it's causing an error, we need to deactivate it. And then you can figure out whether you can find an alternative, or you talk to a developer to get a fix, or what you want to do, but at least your site is up and running again. You could try and edit the problem file. Again, if you've got FTP access, that's possible. If it's something like that error that I had where there's a spelling mistake, you might be safe to give that kind of thing a try, but generally, I'd avoid it. If you can't narrow down what the problem is and it looks like it's a conflict between things, you used to have to deactivate everything and then turn things on one by one until something broke again. And you had this kind of trial and error process for figuring out what was wrong. The good news is now that this plugin, the health check plugin, allows you to still kind of do that, but you don't break your site for everyone, you only break it for yourself. When you activate this troubleshooting mode that the plugin allows, it means that you can deactivate everything and see what works and doesn't work, but you don't break it for everyone in the public who views your site. They'll still see the site as it's meant to be, while you're able to troubleshoot kind of behind the scenes. Okay, so the domain's loaded, we're not seeing any PHP errors. What's going to be the next thing you see? Problems with CSS and JavaScript. This is when the site's loaded, but things aren't quite looking right. CSS problems will be to do with things being out of place, like the layout is broken. Form elements might look ugly or misaligned or out of place. Maybe you have elements overlapping, your menu disappears behind the content or things like that. These are all the kinds of things that CSS would be handling. JavaScript problems are usually to do more with interaction and things that happen magically after the page is already loaded. So it'd be dynamic elements not appearing, like maybe you've got Twitter widgets or Facebook widgets that don't load. It could be to do with interactions not working, like if you've got a pop-up that happens when you click, like a light box for images or something like that. If they're not working, it's usually related to JavaScript. It's all of these kinds of dynamic interactive things that happen with JavaScript. The great thing about troubleshooting them is that all modern browsers have got tools built into them that you can use to start troubleshooting this stuff. If you're using Chrome or Safari or Firefox, some versions of Explorer have them, but they're a little bit less helpful. I'd usually err towards using Chrome or Firefox or Safari for these tools, which again help you to see some of the errors that are occurring. So you'll notice these all look pretty similar. This is, I think, they look so similar that I can't actually tell. Chrome, I think, I know that was Safari, Firefox, Chrome. You could see in all of these instances we've got the actual page on the left-hand side, and over the right-hand side you're actually seeing the code that is, just the code that is making the page up, essentially. So this is after the PHP has worked, it's spat out the page, and this is the code for it, along with a bunch of extra information like some layout information and the styles and those different types of things. Now the cool thing about this is we can inspect elements to drill down to what the problem really is. So if I know I've got an element on the page that's in the wrong place and I want to find out what the problem is with that particular thing, that title, that heading, that whatever it is, I can click, this is, my examples are all in Chrome, but the others work similarly. Click this little button up the top with the red square around it, and that's going to let me select a particular part of the page. So you can see here, this is for Wordcamp Auckland that was on 2 weeks ago. I've got here the main heading element I've selected. Now when I've selected that, I've got some information up the top there about its styling. I can see overlaid the margins and the padding of this element, and over on the right-hand side here, I've got all of the styles that are applied to that element. So it's all the information about what it is, where it is, and why it looks the way it does. So what that lets us do is see the CSS over here. So you can see I've now gone to this list. Up the top there, it shows me what element it is. It's a table row, and then down the bottom it tells me the styles that are applied to it. So it's got a border, it's got a whole bunch of other information about it I can see quite specifically. The even better news is that what you can do in this kind of view is you can start to tweak things and play with them. So if I want to, this will be just for me while I'm looking at this, it's not going to affect it for anyone else. I can decide to add some CSS code to change things live and on the fly. This is literally something that I would do tens of times a day when someone needs a CSS fix. The first thing that I do is I open up the Chrome Inspector and I start writing the CSS for them, previewing it so only I see it, make sure it works, and then I would give it to them to use. So this is a great way to tinker with making things look a bit different. You do need to remember that any CSS that you write there, you've got to actually put into the site, either in the customizer or a theme settings or somewhere else. This is only going to be until you refresh the page next time. It's just for right now. We can check JavaScript errors. When the page loads, if there are JavaScript errors, you'll see up in the top right-hand side there, we've got 1X and 2 warnings. These are the specific errors that are occurring that might be stopping interactive elements from working. When you click them, it opens up the actual error list so that we can see them. In the same way as we saw the PHP errors, we don't have to go digging quite so hard for JavaScript. We can see it right here in the browser. So this is the error here. In this instance, it's saying an uncaught reference error, the response is not defined, which again, is kind of vague and weird. But let's have a look at some common JavaScript problems really quickly while I wrap up. Uncaught reference error, jQuery is not defined. jQuery is a package of JavaScripts that lots and lots of themes and plugins lean on to make their life easier. But it can also be used at the wrong time. So sometimes your plugins or themes might be trying to do something when the framework it's using to do it is not ready yet. That's when you'll see this kind of thing. It can be to do with plugin conflicts or things being kind of set up incorrectly by your theme. You might see type error undefined is not a function. This is another thing where, similar to the no function, it's trying to do something but it can't find what it's meant to do. So it's to do with maybe, this often happens when you have, if you've bought something, say from ThemeForest, which is a theme and a plugin, and they both have to be active, when you deactivate the plugin, it's still looking for stuff from there and it's not finding it. That's often when you'll run into that kind of problem. Cannot read property length. That's often to do with when it's looking for something on the page. So it's looking for a particular element to make changes to, like your header or a particular div, and it can't find it on the page. What do we do then? Similar situation, I'll go back a couple of seconds real quickly. We can see here with this error, it also tells us the file that the error is occurring in, and we can see, again, the path to it. So this one is in WP Content plugins, so it's a plugin. WP Church Center is the plugin, and it's somewhere in there. So we've narrowed it down to the specific plugin that has the problem, which helps us when we get here, because we can deactivate that plugin or theme. We can contact the developer and see what they say. Oftentimes, optimization plugins like WP Optimize and things which minify JavaScripts can cause problems because they decide on the order things should be stacked together in, and often they get it wrong. Edit the file, don't do it, but you could. Speed and loading problems, I'll do this real quick. In the inspector here as well, when you go to the network tab, it will show you all the different assets that load for your site and how long they take. So when you reload the page, it'll load all these things over the right-hand side to tell you how big they are, how long they took to load. It's great for tracking down when you've got a 5 megabyte image as a background somewhere. We're just slowing your whole site down. So that's it. Now you know how to troubleshoot.
Thank you, Jordan. So we've got a couple of moments. Is anyone, if you've got some questions, we've got a microphone here that we can run around to you. Don't let Jordan off easily. Give him some curly as you can. You can punch me later.
If I can't answer it now, come and find me after.
Sorry, I'm going to break your first rule and give you not a curly question, a basic one. The last screen that you showed up, the speed with the right-hand side. Sorry, very basic. How do I get to see that on my site?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so loading any of these tools you can find from the View menu of your browser. Lots of them are also toggled by just hitting F12. I know definitely Chrome and Safari open it up. If you hit F12 while you're in your browser, it'll pop out these developer tools. In the instance of the network speed one, you actually have to select the little network tab. The full screen mode is not showing the whole, oh no, there. So by default, it'll load with the Elements tab selected, at least for Chrome. You'll need to click on the network one, but then you'll need to reload the page. So it actually will check everything as you reload. And it will be specific to your browser connection as well. So if you're tethering on 3G or something like that, you're gonna see slower speed. It's not the same as doing a site speed test with Pingdom or GTmetrix or anything like that.
Thanks for that. That was really, really useful. I just had a question about the browser developer tools and whether there is any huge difference between Chrome or Safari developer tools, or if you would use them at different times, or are they exactly the same?
That's a good question. I use Chrome because it's what I use. Each of the browser vendors do try and put different features into their developer tools to try and get people using them, basically. Firefox particularly has had a bunch of advancements recently, and they've got a lot more, you can get a lot more information and control about layout and stuff, I guess, when you're looking at CSS and those kinds of things. I haven't actually played with them yet because I'm so busy just doing it that I haven't had time to play with a new toy. But generally speaking, I've found Chrome and Safari to be pretty similar. They might have slight differences in how they kind of allow you to edit things or check things, but it's kind of a matter of preference.
I have a comment on my technique. I add a step after you've established the DNS is working.
Yes.
But before trying to load, if the PHP fails, I try and load readme.html, because that bypasses lots of things, and if that's working, you know that your basic server's healthy.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually really clever. I like that.
And it also might tell you that you've got htaccess problems or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't like having a readme HTML there, I load up a very simple file that I call kittens.html that loads up photos of kittens, so that there's no security problem there or vulnerability that I might be launching on in my
That's
site.
really clever. I like that. I'm going to use that. So that's a really good suggestion. What it means is that on your server, WordPress runs on PHP, which means it does all of that processing to work, but HTML pages, which some of you may have used a long, long time ago or more recently, don't do any of that processing. They just work automatically in the browser. So the suggestion is that if you have access, the WordPress comes with a readme.html file at your domain /readme.html. But you could also add your own file in there, which would allow you to check that, yes, the domain is definitely working because I can see this file, and then you can go to the next step of seeing if it's a PHP error or an htaccess error, which I didn't talk about. Last question?
Yeah, it was just a tip. So yeah, you can use web developer tools or GTmetrix to measure the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I generally use GTmetrix. It has like a waterfall breakdown of like which scripts are taking the longest or images, and you can compress images with a plugin called Imagify. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. GTmetrix, which is just GTmetrix with an X.com, is actually a really, really great tool for, it actually gives you more information on your kind of site speed, and it pulls in information from a few sources, and it will similarly tell you what assets are taking a long time to load and make some recommendations. So that's a really good tool to use as well.
Jordan, we just have one more down the front here, if that's okay.
That's fine by me, if it's fine with you.
Thanks, great presentation, thank you.
Thanks.
Look, I came across an issue that I'm about to troubleshoot now. I haven't looked into in the log yet, but it's where the search results inside bbPress comes up with some entries on how many search results are found, but there's no content. So there are no errors. I looked in Inspector and so on.
Yeah.
So my next step is the log. But if there was nothing in the log, are there any other areas that you would recommend that might surface some clues about that type of error?
Sure. So the kind of thing, so if it's loading something saying it's found search results, but there's no search results being shown, my gut feel is that there will be a PHP error in the log. So that kind of thing, I wouldn't expect there to be a JavaScript error in the browser. I'd expect there to be something in the log that's stopping it from displaying those results. If it were me, I'd have a tinker and see and edit the file on my own machine and see if I can get it to spit out the results in some other fashion. Otherwise, I'd be suggesting either bbPress is community built, so it's tough to get immediate advice on that. But if you've got other plugins that might be interacting with it, you could talk to the developer of that. My hope would be that you'd have a PHP error that would help you dig a little bit deeper into it.
Thank you.
That's all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for Jordan. Thank you.
Come and grab me if you want.
Stalk him in the hallways and ask more questions. So we've got a quick changeover. In this room now, we've got Jane Tweedy speaking in about 5 minutes, talking about website development, so talking about handover of websites after they've been built. Jasmine Andrews is in room 2, and she's got a talk that's planning your website roadmap. So that's in room 2 across the hallway. So just about 5 minutes and we'll get switched over and have their next session. in here. So next up we have a session with Jane Twitty. So Jane's going to be talking about what happens after the website's built. So have we got a quick show of hands? How many developers do we have in here at the moment? So people who are building websites for customers? Right, you're in the right room. So let's, round of applause for Jane. Let's welcome her and look forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just get this going. Okay. That's not what I want to see. Okay, so thank you for coming along today. So this is geared at people that are delivering websites, but also, in fact, this actually provides to any service provider, any person providing anything really. Could be a product or a service, and making sure that you're actually getting the after-sales service. Because what often happens, particularly with websites, is that we hand them out to the customer, and then that's it. See you later, bye-bye, off to the next job. And we don't bother doing anything to maintain that relationship. And what I'm going to give you today is some examples of some really bad issues that have happened, things that I've found on Facebook forums recently, like in the last 2 weeks, but also client sites that I have worked with. So I'm going to talk to you about that. So, usual disclaimer, this information is generic in nature. If you need specific advice, please come and get it. Who am I? So I was given a little intro, but basically I have a couple of businesses and I also work as a Business Connect advisor. How many people here are from New South Wales? Most of you, 2/3 of you. If you're in New South Wales and haven't taken advantage of the service, please do so. You get 4 hours business advice at no cost to you. So you might want to use it for yourself, but you also might want to let your clients know about it, particularly people that come to you that aren't quite ready for a website just yet because they don't know the basics. So through that role, I've met about 1,000 business owners, one-on-one, face-to-face. Now that's a hell of a lot of people, hell of a lot of intel. And what that's enabled me to do is realise that there's a lot of commonality of issues. And a lot of people are getting ripped off or ripping themselves off through what they don't know. Now, I then developed FAQ business training, which is what I present these slides under. So just quickly, that Business Connect program, it is 4 hours, no cost. You can get additional hours. I have set on there $150 for 6 hours, but that does depend on the centre because some of them are twice that price. But Western Sydney Business Centre is $150. You can get 34 hours in the program. We do workshops as well. And if you are outside New South Wales, you don't miss out completely. If you go to business.gov.au/assistance, you'll find out what's available in your location. So today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the issue, why I'm talking about this in the first place, which is a combination of bad websites and poor customer care. We're going to talk about who owns the website. It was something that came up in the Aussie Divi forum a couple of weeks ago, so I thought I'll clarify that today. We're going to talk about seeking feedback, which is really important not to do just immediately after you've delivered the site, but actually again a bit further on. And we're going to talk about customer care programs and upselling and Q&A at the end. So basically the process when we have a client is that we do the marketing side, right? We do the pitch. We get that client on board, we get them to come and see us, and we're focused on that. Now, I don't know about you, but you might have noticed some people are really good at this part of the process. In fact, they seem to love that part of the process so much, but then when people actually get the service from them, they kind of fail to deliver the service because they're so busy, they love the chase. So I don't know if you know anybody like that, but there's some people that like the thrill of the chase. So they tend to really like the pitch phase. Then you've got people that are awesome at the delivery phase, okay? So they'll spend a lot of time and effort getting the right site, getting it up and running, getting it all going, handing it over, woohoo! But like I said, once they've handed it over, crickets. So the key bit that makes the difference is the after-sales service. So what you need to do is make sure that you're focusing on these areas. So you've got to check that your client is happy with your site, not just the day that you deliver it though. And I'll give you a couple of examples of some shockers, one which was a 3-year gap as to why a client could be happy and then very unhappy for a very good reason. We can maintain contact with our clients, and that would allow us to be the port of call if they need to update their site, because we all know we don't just put a site out there and then that's it, okay? We don't leave it. Although I did come across a site that was 13 years old now. was dated it said, we're going to update our site in 2006. And I was like, whoa, that's a few years ago. So what is the issue? So the issue is bad websites and no customer care. Now, I spoke at Wordcamp last year and I talked about a topic about people lacking website briefs. And I did say, and I did clarify then, and I'll clarify again today, I think the people that come to places like this are not the people that are doing the things wrong. Because you guys are community focused. So you are actually able to basically use some of these examples I'm giving you to reverse engineer and go, okay, they're doing that. Just checking I don't do any of that. Or could I pick up clients because I can be clever in my marketing and actually let people know about the things that I do really well that offset what other people do badly. Because we don't like to talk people down. We shouldn't be talking people down. But what we can do is emphasise our strengths that offset their weaknesses. So, post-delivery, hopefully you get a happy client, right? That's what we're going for. Woohoo! Client's happy. They're like, yes, got my website. It's so exciting. It's new, it's shiny, does everything I thought it would do. Awesome. We have a lot of clients that are like that. That's great. But 3 months, 6 months, a year later, is the client still happy? Have you bothered to check with the client if they're still happy? Because what happens if a client isn't happy? What do? Tell everyone. They do. They tell everybody. And the thing is, that is not good for you. And the thing is, the one person they didn't tell? You. 100%. So, after a 3 month, 6 month, a year period, what we can find is that there's a portion of clients that are still happy, still love us. There's a portion of clients that are just, meh, it's okay, but meh, not really that fussed. Hasn't quite gone as well as I hoped. Thought I'd get more clients out of it, meh. And then you've got the ones that are genuinely not happy. And that can be for a variety of reasons. It could be a client fault, or it could be a website designer or developer fault. On the flip side, we have the unhappy clients. And I'm going to go through a couple of examples of people that are unhappy on day dot. So the thing is with unhappy clients after 3 months or 6 months, they're either still going to be unhappy, or they might have moved to the, it's okay stage. But it's going to be a unicorn if they move from that position to happy. So obviously we ideally want customers happy on day one. So this was an example of a website complaint that I saw on Facebook. I know that you're probably not going to be able to read all the detail of the text, but I'm going to pull out the key issues, and I've actually broken it into 4 parts. So the whole white bit is actually one email message. So the issues that this person pointed out. So first of all, I'll point out this particular example went on to Like-Minded Bitches Drinking Wine, which I think is up to about 100,000 people on that page. We're talking quite big numbers, right? So it's not like only a few people have seen this post. A lot of people have seen it. And one thing to be wary of as website designers and developers, when we put on the bottom of our websites who created it, that's a good thing and a bad thing. Because I've seen plenty of examples when I'm like, oh, I wonder who did that. Go and look up the person's name, look at their website, see down the bottom exactly who did their website. So make sure if you're going to put your name on a website, you're proud to have your name on that website, because it will come back to bite you. So in this particular example, this lady complained and said her website was delivered late. In this case, it was actually only 2 weeks, which to be honest, is not that bad. I've had clients that have had websites delivered 2 years late. Now the problem with this is that you've got to think about the implications. Somebody that complains about a 2-week late delivery, that's not necessarily a big deal for a lot of people. But for somebody that their website needs to be there for a particular event occurring or something, that's a big problem, okay? I've seen an example where one lady where she was mucked around on her website so much, and it was like a year or so late, and in the end, that business just folded, okay? So the expense, the cost, the drama, the time, all for naught. This website contains typos. She had the word dessert in her website, which the website owner might have put in as desert instead. The person supplied fonts and colours to the designer, which the designer then chose to ignore. So maybe there's also an issue in this one of communication. So the issues here as well, the next step was she complained to the designer. Designer went and made some changes, but not all the changes. Okay, so client's kind of grumpier again now. But then to put the icing on the cake, what does the designer do? Sends them an invoice for the changes to the site that were required because the web designer hadn't done their job properly in the first place. Now, we all know there are times when clients ask for more, okay? And that is perfectly fine to say, fine, if you want more, we can deliver more, but it will cost you more. But if you have made the mistakes, if you can't spell dessert and the material was given to you correctly, fix the goddamn spelling of the word dessert. Like, it's not hard. And certainly don't charge the client for it. Now, the wording she used here was quite funny. She said, she's clearly pissed at me. And I said to her, to be honest, she probably isn't. It is just the space, which is a sad indictment, but unfortunately, this is not a one-off thing that I've seen. Now, what the end result is this client is unhappy, okay? Clearly, we can see that. But she's going to give bad feedback to other people. But also, she's commented here that she feels she can't promote her own business because the website's not ready. It's not up to scratch. She's hired a website designer because she's not a website person. She can't do it herself. She outsourced it for a reason. So you've got to think about the implications that you take on when you are the website developer. Here's another example. Do many people here do their own hosting? Do those that do hosting, do you white label or do you do your own in-house server? White label? Okay. In-house. In-house? So what happens if it goes wrong? Like if your server needs to be switched off at the wall and you're in China at the time. What happens? Just something to ponder. This example, though, was somebody that was running a hosting in-house. And rather than communicating the fact that he'd stopped doing hosting, he'd literally just stopped and he said, here are 50 files, go deal with them. Now, this is freaking disgusting. You don't just decide, spur of the moment, to stop delivering a service, and then that's it. Clearly, that's not a good way to communicate. So he kindly set the backups of the website to her. Well, that's really great. But again, somebody that's not tech savvy has absolutely no idea what to do to that. So not only did she lose her website, she also lost her emails. Another one is where website developers hold sites ransom. And I've seen many clients where this has been the case. And we're not talking ransom because they haven't paid up and the client hasn't, that's fine. That's why a lot of you use staging servers and things, get the payment from the client and then put it up on their site, fine. This is where, though, the web owner goes, it's my site, I developed it, I'm keeping it, and you're not having it. I'm not giving you access. They have paid for the domain name, the web person, and the client doesn't even have access to their website. This is terrible to their domain name. This is terrible and not a good practice. Another example, somebody who was asking for a new web designer because I've been stuffed around. They weren't doing what was promised. The cost was too high and they were like a relationship. And we all know cost too high could mean anything. But I know from another client, for instance, she was quoted $180 an hour for her website updates and she knew they were being done in India. Seems a little steep to me for an Indian person. What other ones have I got? Things like the site wasn't exactly what I wanted. It's not what I thought I was getting. The biggest issue, though, honestly, a lot of time is being ghosted, a lack of communication. So I had a client the other day and she said, look, I don't care if my web designer's busy and can tell me, okay, I'll come back to you at the end of next week. But they're not telling them that. They're literally just ignoring them. So make sure you're communicating, even if it's something you think the client doesn't want to hear. Now, the next one is site not working. So, my site's not working. There can be a number of reasons for this, and a lot of this comes down to the expectations and setting them up properly from the outset. So make sure when you set up your agreement with a client, it's very clear. Are you doing any SEO activity or are you doing none? Because if that client expects to rank, and that doesn't happen because there was no SEO done, that's going to cause a problem. Now, I mentioned earlier this. Site not indexed for 3 years. Client came to me as a business advisor and said, I think there's a problem with my website. Can you look at it? So I simply went site, domain name. No, site not indexed at all. But that's not the worst part of it. The fact was she was paying maintenance fees for 3 years to the web developer. I'm sorry, but that is rubbish. There's just no excuse for that. How can that web designer not have noticed that this site was not being indexed? There's some basic checks here we can do. Now, as I said, these are all giving us some really good ideas of things maybe we can do to stop these things happening. Another does the website work. This is a client I'm working with at the moment. The text on their website is minuscule. You need a magnifying glass to be able to see it. They have product pages where it just has the products at the top of the page are wire and glue for a product like a gate that's way down the page or on 3 pages down. There's no order to the website at all. It's terrible. It's just an enfold theme. So it's just been put on as a stock standard theme. So they said they spent $10,000 on an e-commerce site. And I'm like, well, to be fair, $10,000 for e-commerce isn't that bad. But it is when it purely is straight out of the box theme, completely cookie cutter, no tailoring. And the site has absolutely no flow. The irony of this, though, is that the web designer actually says in their marketing material, making sure your pages flow nicely is very important to keeping the bounce rate down and your conversions up. Don't know if any of you noticed the bottom line there. The bounce rate on their product pages, 86%. Do you think that they're doing what they preach? Hell no. Another complaint about websites not working is I do a simple check with them and I teach them tools that they can use themselves, so things like Uber Suggest. So I know some people go, oh, it's not that reliable. It's reliable enough for this purpose. This particular website had things like 10 404 page errors. It had 29 pages with a low word count because this particular web designer likes sites to look pretty and does not like words on the pages. Things like that. So that's why her site is not working. Hence the traffic. And it looks like there's been some action lately, but we've gone from 0 visitors a month to 3. Woo! Don't spend them all at once. I mentioned before, who does the website belong to? Now, this is an issue and it came up in the Aussie Divi community, so I thought I'd bring it up here. Now, did you know our website is not a thing in copyright space? It actually isn't. The website is actually a sum of all the parts. It is a sum of the copy on the website, the pictures on the website, the source code. So therefore, the website isn't actually something that can actually be copywritten, have a copyright on it, which is a bit of an odd one. So one of the things that's really important that you as a web designer is clear about who owns what and where. So have in your contract things like if the client's supplying you the photos, that they have got authority to use those photos. I had one client who decided that she could just go into Google and pull off images that didn't have watermarks, because that meant they were okay, because it's only the ones with the watermarks that are an issue, and I'm just like, oh. And she got this letter from the US for $300, and I went, she says, is this real? And I went, yeah, it is. And by the way, fix your entire website and all your social media because you've basically stolen every single image that you have. Not a good look. So with the website, there's law and there's reality, right? So technically, you as the web designer could own parts of the website. However, you're building the site for a client. You've been commissioned by the client. The client really needs to own it. Their whole business is reliant in a lot of cases on a website working. And obviously, if it's an e-commerce business and an online e-commerce business only, they have to have that. They must have access to the website. And I know some designers and developers like to lock it down because I don't want someone breaking it. Well, then make sure you've put things in it like Updraft Plus. Make sure you've got the backup facilities there. So if they do stuff it up, it can be fixed quite easily. And of course, you can charge them to fix it. Customer satisfaction. So the ultimate end game of customer satisfaction is to get repeat business from happy clients. But in addition, we want you to be their first port of call for all future business they might do. And we also want to be their preferred supplier, but we also want them recommending us to other people. Now, the ultimate raving fan, and this is going to show my age, was back in the 70s or 80s, the Remington Shaver Company. This guy bought it. He loved the product so much, he bought the company. We don't need a raving fan quite that extreme, but raving fans that will go and support us and say, oh my gosh, you've got to use this web guy, they're amazing. That's really awesome for your business. So customer care. Immediately post website delivery, focus on care. Don't focus on selling, focus on care. So ask about feedback. Now I've got here a Rocket Book. Does anyone know what these are? Little notebooks that you can actually send to the cloud and stuff like that. They're really cool and you can wipe them off and reuse them. So I got these for my birthday and my partner had ordered them for me and he got a call the next day after they were delivered. And they called him up and they said, oh, did they arrive safely? So they just wanted to check that the packet of 3 had arrived, they were all there, there was no creases or damage to any of them, so they purely were checking the quality of it. And they said, oh look, if you're not sure how to set it up, because he said, oh no, she hasn't got them yet because it was for a birthday present. He said, oh no, if she has any trouble setting them up, get in touch with us. This was for a $130 purchase because it was a set of 3 of these. That's amazing service for a $130 product, okay? So seek feedback. Ask the client for their feedback. Don't take it personally, but make sure that their site's working. If you made mistakes, like spelling dessert wrong, fix it without charging the client. It should be part of the proper thing. And that might be a little bit of a delay. It might not be today that they notice it. It might be 2 weeks later they notice it. Fix it for them if they can't fix that stuff themselves. The only thing I do here, though, is just confirm, hopefully you've got it in your agreement anyway, that you can put them on an email list because we want to maintain contact with them. So the feedback, do clients love you? Make sure there's a loop in the feedback. You get the feedback from the client, you respond to the feedback, you take on board their suggestions, some that you might ignore, but you still take it on board. Do you offer a warranty or a guarantee to the service? Consider offering a knowledge database. So when you deliver a site, especially a WordPress site, what you can do is offer them little simple training videos. So you could do screencasting, how to load a blog on your website, how to change a photo, how to add some text, okay? So the simple things that they should be able to do themselves. So you can create a knowledge base, as I said, just screencast videos. Screencastify is like $24 for a year. You can put them up on Google Drive. So all that's going to cost you nothing, basically, apart from a little bit of time. And you can charge the client extra, put it in your package and say, you'll get access to my knowledge base. It sounds pretty cool, right? But it means you don't have to be there to answer all those tedious questions. So it's really great for customer service, but it's also something that you can charge more for. Now, what most of you probably don't do is this step. 1 month post-delivery, 3 months post-delivery, 6 months post-delivery, annually. Do you go back to the client? Do you bother to go back and check on them? Again, I would do this. Now, the site that was not visible for 3 years, imagine if they'd just done this, a mini audit. They just checked, is the site up? If they have access still to the Google Analytics, obviously get the client's permission to have ongoing access, but check what the traffic is and things. Note to the customer if there might be some issues. Mention to them there's some 404 errors. Communicate to your customer, advise them of any issues, and you can then also at this stage take a little reminder and say, hey, look, if you have got access to their site still, you can say things like, well, hey, we noticed you haven't updated any of your plugins. Now this is where emails can be good to be maintained, but also remember, ask for feedback at these later stages. We want to remind the customer, if they've got a problem, don't blab to everyone in the world about it without coming to us first. So it's really important. So when we send these emails out, they could be things like, last year there was a really big WordPress user security update that had to be done. And a lot of people don't do their updates, right? A lot of these business owner clients. So sending them an email and saying, hey, this update's really important. If you're not sure, if you haven't updated your website for a while, please let us know and we can do it for you for X fee. Okay, so it's a way of upselling. It's a way of making sure that the website is maintained properly and is going to be able to be used. But also, at the annual anniversaries and things, we know that the website's getting a bit older. Maybe they've got new products or services they want to add. Maybe they've spoken to someone about SEO and they've told them, hey, don't have a one-page website or a very small website. Actually have some pages dedicated to services and things. So on the anniversary, you can also acknowledge them then. So say, happy anniversary. So it's the anniversary of their website, not of their wedding, in case you're wondering. So the website's date. So imagine if you sent this 3 years later. So 3 years later, you send them a thing saying, hey, and you might send them some stats about 3-year-old websites or something like that. So it keeps you in mind. That way, when they're thinking of upgrading, they're going, this person's been really helpful to me. They've been giving me these little tips, these little helpful bits of information. And you might give them a little gift or a little service offer. Maybe you give them a copy of a mini audit. You know, those things that you were doing anyway, but this time we actually send them a little PDF or something of that audit. So think about what you can do. I had a house I purchased through Lang & Simmons in Hornsby, and each year they would send me a card, and the card would say, hey, happy anniversary. If you want to know stats about what your house is worth now, please come, here's some information, and if you want to come into the office and grab a bottle of wine, please do so. So that way they weren't sending out wine to everybody, only the people that came in and got it, but they kept forefront of mind. So when 4 years later I was selling my house, who did I go to? Lang & Simmons in Hornsby, because they were front of mind. I still did a check, but they were still my first port of call. So to remind you today, plenty of people are delivering websites to unhappy clients or clients that become unhappy because they become aware of other factors. So don't be one of the people delivering the bad websites, but also think about how you can change some of your marketing so that you're actually picking up clients as well. Make sure you've got feedback in there. Make sure you've got surveys and things that are being done. Make sure you're making that genuine customer care call, particularly that first step and maybe the 3 months in, to make sure that that client is getting a great service. Think about how you can do those mini audits and maintain the client contact. So I'm going to give you some homework, because you come along to these sessions and you know what, you might go, oh yeah, that was great, that was interesting, but you do nothing happens. So homework, review your onboarding process and make sure it's set up for success. So you may need to put a few tweaks in your contract. You may need to say, do you do SEO or not, so the client doesn't have a false expectation. Maybe adjust your package prices, particularly if you're going to add things like the database, the knowledge base. Create your feedback surveys and your customer care program and start implementing it. So happy to take questions and answers from you now, or questions for me to give answers to. And thank you so much for coming along today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, if we've got some questions, we can run a microphone to you. Just make sure the questions aren't how to spell dessert, okay?
I can spell it, it's all right.
Can we, though?
I don't know.
Thank you, Jane, for all this useful information. Now, I'd just like to pick your brains. I have this customer who has 2 websites. I made one of the websites.
Yep.
Another web designer did the other website, but he's not doing too much work for her, and she desperately needs to get stuff done on that other website that I don't own. What do you, and she really wants to hand over this website to me, but it's not mine, I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So do you reckon I should get this website, and if yes, what should be the process to inform the current web designer?
Really, it comes down to your practices and the way you behave. Like, I had a client that said to me, oh, I don't want to steal anyone else's client. But at the end of the day, they have got an equal opportunity as you do to deliver a good service to the client. Now, if you're delivering a good service and the other person is not, then really it comes down to that person, that client, speaking to their web person and going, you're not delivering a very good service, either boost it up or we're going to take it away from you. So it really should be a call that that client's making, and they should really be the one to break up the relationship. It's actually a blog I've got drafted and haven't quite got done yet about ending relationships in service space. Because we do need to end the relationship. We shouldn't just walk away. We should give them an opportunity, but at the end of the day, I would be trying to get hold of it if the client's not happy. Because they are the one, like I said, it's not the web designer's website. I know it's your baby, you've put it together, but at the end of the day, the purpose of the website is so this person can conduct their business. And if they can't conduct their business because their website's not good enough, what's the purpose of it? What's the point in it? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. We run a plug-in business which has price points lower than it would be for a website. So you've got my mind thinking about after-sales service on plugins. And the classic approach is to put them in a mailing list, and they just get the usual stuff dripped in, which I personally don't like because it's very impersonal and everybody knows that.
Yep.
Do you have any other thoughts, silver bullets, about how to provide good customer service on a low price point?
Like you said, it's the variation of the price points that are going to make the difference as to how far you go. But things like those sort of videos and the knowledge-based type setup is something that you can do at any price point, because honestly, they are that cheap. If it's, the software's costing you $50 maximum, there's free services that you can use as well. Like, it's not costing you hardly anything except for some time to sit there and record. So those could be then put on a YouTube channel if you want to make it publicly available, because you've got plugins where you don't really know who's actually got the plugin, or it's a paid plugin that you would have all the details. So if it's people that you've got the details for, then obviously emails go out and things. The things you've got to remember is I get literally probably, I don't know, I probably get 1,000 emails a day or something ridiculous, because I've got so many emails, so many places, crazy. But it doesn't mean I look at them all. But what I do is if I need something, I will go in there and look for it. So I'll go and do a search for whatever, plug-in help or something, and I will look in there, and then your email will pop up when I need it. So don't sort of think just because somebody's not opening your email every single day that emails aren't a good strategy. They are. But also think about every now and then for your higher value clients, contacting them every now and then and actually just giving them a quick phone call. There's nothing wrong with that. Reach out to your clients. Because like my partner, when he got this call from Rocketbook, he was just like, what? What do you mean you're actually doing a customer care call? They don't try to sell him anything. But now look, I've told you about Rocketbook. I told another networking group about Rocketbook, and 3 people in that group went out and bought one. So they've got business out of it because of their strategy. So although that might cost them something, it's only $130, and if you buy, only one or whatever, it's $40 or whatever, they've decided that strategy is helping them get word of mouth. So I'd take the same approach.
Any more questions, guys? Okay.
I'd like to say a statement, like some of those Facebook things that you've put in.
Yep.
I'm just going to take a break. It's hard to say, like this expectations of clients, right?
Yep.
Back to.
Yep.
And there's people out there that have probably bought less than $500 websites. I want a website, I want all this. They go and put it out there.
Yep.
And someone said, well, guess what? You're going to get peanuts for what you paid for.
Yep.
And it's just sort of stating, yeah, and you know what? Some of those people are the ones that get on and have a whinge.
Okay,
They're the ones that are going to really whinge.
Yeah. So the site that I showed you with the Uber Suggest information, that was a brochure-style website, no e-commerce, tiny little bit of e-commerce, but not really e-commerce. $10,000 she paid for that website. And it is honestly basically a piece of shit. So best way of putting it. It looks pretty. So the client was initially, okay, this is cool. But she was frustrated still with the web designer because the web designer was here in Sydney, but communication barrier between her and the website person meant that things didn't quite get explained very well, and then it was all offshore to India in the background. Yeah. So she said, like, I'm doing stuff and they're just not doing it. So that client came to me knowing that I dabble in websites and things, but I'm not a website person. I'm a business advisor, business trainer. I'm not a website person. So I've actually sat down with her and she's like, I want you to do this stuff. I want you to make these changes. And I said to her, well, some of the stuff is outside my expertise. I'd have to get a website designer or a website developer to help me. She's like, I don't care if you do that, but I want to pay you to then pay them, because she has so burned, she doesn't want to touch them anymore. So this comes back to the comment before. I think most of you people in this room are not people that are delivering these shitty things to clients, but what you're doing is you can pick up those clients instead of having to have people like me have to act as middleman. So I've got Mitch working with a few of my clients because I met him through one of the WordPress meetups. I'm like, if you're part of this community, you're doing the right thing by people.
I can say I've picked up 3 clients because of that sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah. So the thing is, people want to deal with good people, and there's people out there that do want to pay good money, but they just can't find quality. They can't find people that are doing the right thing. And that's really sad. So you guys that are doing the right thing, make sure you pick them up.
You can pick up crap clients.
Yes.
You can pick up really crap ones that are just, I don't know,
gut
instinct. What you're
instinct.
trying to say is like they're tire kickers or whatever, and they've been through 2, 3, 5 designers because they're nightmares.
Gut instinct. So you know when you pick up the phone and start dealing with that person, you're going to get the red flags on the phone. If you get the red flags, no deal. We do not need clients that are shit, okay? We need clients that are good. So if you know that that client's not going to be someone who's going to pay, you know they're going to be a pain in your ass, just don't take them on.
Yeah, just send them the website Fiverr.
Exactly. Say go Fiverr, go to Upwork, go somewhere else. Because I know, if I know a client's a problem, I had a client that literally was going to throw herself under a bus, was her statement. She wanted me to then refer her to a resume writer. And I said, I'm not referring you to anybody in my connections. Because you've treated me like crap, I'm not having you do that to somebody else. I'm sorry, I draw the line. So yeah, delivering them to Fiverr or Upwork's probably fine, but I ain't giving them to one of my contacts. It means too much to me. So yeah, 100% gut instinct. If you can see that there's red flags all over them, see you later.
It rang, but it was like,
Because you've got to pay attention. When the little bell's ringing, pay attention. Because honestly, I don't know, pretty much any time when the gut instinct isn't right, you just know. You know when it's off. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. We'll follow up on that. So yes, we missed it, right?
Yeah.
Red flag. So now everything's calm. And I'm talking like, this is not big dollars, this is like 3 figures. Less than 100.
So like it's 1.00, 3 figures?
It's like painful now. However, we're at the stage where it's okay.
Yep.
So, but we're at the point now where it's going to, the changes will be made, right? But I'm not sure if we can actually, no matter what we do, I'm not sure if we can facilitate a happy ending. So what would you advise? And quite likely it could end up in that particular group. And I don't care about, I care about the brand, of course.
Yep.
But, if it ends up in the group, it ends up in the group. And there's got to be a point where you just got to say, well, okay, that's potentially going to happen.
You can't please everyone all the time, okay? And we're not trying to do that, okay? So this is more about the overall that you're doing, not every last individual one. So sometimes you just have to, cut a client or whatever. They may not take it well. That's okay. But just make sure you've done the right thing in the process. So you've been polite to them. You haven't sent them any dodgy emails that they can then cut and paste and put up in groups and stuff like that, because God, we've all seen those. Or the guy that called his Google review a pig and an idiot. That just doesn't win you any friends. So just be good business people. Just be good humans. And as long as you're kind and as long as you do the right thing, then most people will see through that. And they'll see that, oh, this person's bitching and moaning all the time anyway. It's just who they are. Yeah.
How do you delete bad Google? I'm just seeing
Yep.
people that have these Google reviews.
Yep.
Obviously, they're ruining their business. Is there any way, anything for those?
Deleting route, you can report a review to Google, but you really need to have evidence that it is definitely fake. So for instance, there was a case where 5 glass balustrade companies all had 1-star reviews on the same day from the same person, and another business had a 5-star review. Well, it was kind of obvious what was going on there. So obviously you can go into the person's reviews, do a screenshot, send that off to Google and say, look, this is rubbish. Clearly they did not get 5 lots of glass balustrades installed on the same day. So that one there, you can easily get rid of it. Honestly, 99.9% of the time though, the review will stick. So really it comes down to the way you respond, and same comment to them is the be kind, be a human kind of response, is put a really nice response in. I've seen plenty of examples where something's been rated before the business has even started. They aren't even trading, so there's absolutely no way that customer's been one of theirs. So you just say that. So, you know, we have no record of you being a customer. In fact, we weren't even open then, but if you'd like to come in and test us out, feel free. And the thing is, that tells other people. But you know what? You don't actually want 5-star reviews all glowing. One bad review is actually a good thing because you might get a 4.7 or something like that, but then that people actually realise that you're real. Otherwise, they actually get to the point where they think, is this just all fake and it's your mates? So it actually doesn't harm you at all. Really doesn't. But one thing I will say on those groups, and that's where I hate this, somebody will badmouth somebody on one of those groups, and what will happen is that all these other people go, oh, I'll go and give you a 5-star review to offset that review. But none of them have used the service. That's terrible. That's just as bad, because they still might have been a crappy provider that deserved shitty reviews, and you've just now gone and told people they're awesome. Don't do that. So yeah, be human, be nice, be kind. Simple.
I think we should turn to the web developer next to us and just give them a hug.
That's a good idea. Are you a web developer?
I am.
Oh, I'll give you a hug.
Give me a
then.
hug as I'm walking out the door. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause for Jane, guys. That's a good session. Very good.
Thanks.
Jane, this is a little gift for you to say thank you. Thank you. So, guys, we're going to have a short break. If there's one thing we do well at Wordcamp, it's feed you. So I think there's a cup of tea and possibly something to eat. If you are a coffee drinker, there's still vouchers at the registration desk. So go and ask whoever's there for a couple of vouchers, and you can go upstairs and grab yourself a coffee. And we're back here at 3:25 for the next session.